You know it's good when your 5-year-old is standing there like rapt in attention to what you're singing, and I think that's the power of music and what God can do with music and what God can through your voices and your willingness to offer your gifts. So thank you for that. Isn't that right? I don't know, something about the music, I think it has a way of, it doesn't matter how old you are or what your background is, it has a way of speaking to you, whoever you are, wherever you're at. And so I found that really meaningful. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome, welcome to Century United Methodist Church. My name is David Lee, and I'm one of the pastors here. Privileged to serve, and I want you to know that your presence here today is a blessing to us. It really is. And I want you to know that what we do here as we worship, as we sing songs and pray and hope to hear God's word speak into our lives, that this can be a blessing to you as well. That this could be a time of blessing where God can truly be alive, that we could be open to His Spirit, and that we could allow God's Spirit to move through us. And then somehow, in some way, that you will go with God into the world to be about His peace and His love and His grace. So that's what we're here to do. So welcome. If you've been here the last few weeks, you know that we are on a new series on the life of David, right? The David story, some of the most memorable psalms that we know come from him. He was also a king, he was a shepherd, all that stuff. We're learning about the story of David. And, if you didn't know, the Bible has so much personal detail about David, right? More than anybody else, more than Moses, more than Jesus. They've got the Old Testament, the scriptures have so much personal information about David, so that I feel like as disciples who are looking to study God's word, we're given this example of a full life and what that life with God can look like, or even when they falter. And so this series is about the life of David, but it's also inviting you into that drama, into this drama of life that we get to live out day in and day out, right? And so I'm asking you, as we're looking at the life of David and these personal details that arise, to invite yourself into that story. Let that story come alive in you, walk around in that story, and ask God, how is this story speaking to you? And if not you, how is it impacting you about somebody else or some other situation in your life? And I believe that's the power of stories. The power and the magic of stories is that it has a way of speaking to everyone, wherever you're at, whoever you are, whatever you're going through. The story, through God's Spirit, could speak into your life. That is my hope, that as we go through each of these messages, that you will speak, that you will be hearing and being opened to what God may be sharing with you. And so today, we're going to continue on to the story of David and Saul. David and Saul. And to do this, we're going to go to 1 Samuel chapter 18. The story is long, and so we're only going to read a few verses, and then afterwards, I'm going to try to put it in my own words what that story was, or what that story is that we find in the Bible. 1 Samuel chapter 18, beginning on verse 6. As they were coming home, meeting the armies of Israel, coming back home after their battle, when David returned from killing the Philistine, the women came out from all the towns of Israel, singing and dancing to meet King Saul with tambourines, with songs of joy, and with musical instruments. And the women sang to one another as they made merry. Saul has killed his thousands, and David his 10,000s. Saul was very angry, for this saying displeased him. He said, "They have ascribed to David 10,000s, and to me they have ascribed thousands. What more can he have but the kingdom?" So Saul eyed David from that day on. The next day, an evil spirit from God rushed upon Saul, and he raved within his household. While David was playing the lyre, as he did day by day, Saul had a spear in his hand and threw the spear, for he thought, "I will pin David on the wall." But David eluded him twice. Saul was afraid of David because the Lord was with him, but had departed from Saul. So Saul removed him from his. David marched out and came in, leading the army. David had success in all his undertakings, for the Lord was with him. When Saul saw he had great success, he stood in awe of him. But all Israel and Judah loved David, for it was he who marched out and came in, leading them. This is the word of God for us, people of God. Thanks be to God. So, what a wonderful homecoming it must have been. It should have been, to welcome home the armies of Israel from such a great victory over the hated Philistines. So imagine the crowds, imagine the parade as they arrive in the city with cheers and celebrations going up. All of Israel has come out to celebrate and to welcome their army, their king, and now their new national hero, David, who has slayed Goliath, the giant. Some women, almost spontaneously, it seems, begin to sing and dance because of their joy. They got tambourines and lyres, and they say, Saul has killed his thousands, and David is 10,000s. The implication is obvious, right? It's that David is somehow not just equal to the king, but somehow he is greater than the king. And as you could imagine, Saul hears this, and it displeases him. And yet, we're told in the very next verse that he is also afraid of David, because now he sees the threat to his throne. And so from this point on, Scripture tells us eye on David. So this is where I'm going to be sharing with you more of the story of David and Saul. Here's the rest of that story, right? So at this point, when they come back home, David is now in the king's court. The Bible speaks of an evil spirit because of his extreme reaction to David, right? Twice, he throws a spear at David, saying, "Oh, I'll pin him to the wall." But David eludes them. Just having David in the room for Saul seems to have this kind of triggering effect. He just can't be in his presence, and so Saul has to get him out of his court. So we're told he makes David a commander over 1,000 soldiers. And so he goes out. But what happens? In everything he does, Scripture tells us, he has great success. So it makes David even that much more greater. And we're told all of Israel loved David, and Saul becomes more nervous. And then we get to this strange little episode where Saul offers his first daughter, Merab, to David in marriage. It tells us that it will lead to David fighting more valiantly, which means that he will be put in more harm's way, so that the Philistines will have a better chance of killing him, which will mean that they will do the dirty work that Saul would like to do himself. But David, hearing his Lord's proposal of marriage for his daughter, responds in humility, saying, "Who am I? Who am I to marry the king's daughter? This is not a small thing. I can't do this." And so Saul says, "Okay." And he rescinds the offer, and then gives his daughter to somebody else. What is that, right? At the very least, I was reading this, and I was like, gosh, that is just spiteful, right? That is spiteful. That is mean. So that didn't work. And so Saul comes up with another little ruse, little trick to try and see if he could kill David. And he declares, whoever kills 100 Philistine and brings me their foreskins will have the right to marry my second daughter, Michal. What is Saul doing? Right? He's upping the ante, right? He's ratcheting up the pressure, trying to increase the likelihood of David being killed. He is sending David on a suicide mission. But David doesn't lose heart. He loves this idea. He loves a chance for him to prove himself in some way. And so he rises to the challenge, and we're told that he happily brings home the requisite booty to the king to marry his daughter, who also, we find out, loves David too. Jonathan, Saul's son, and probably the likely successor to the throne, we're told also loves David. And at this point, he intervenes. His father, saying, Father, I see what you're doing. This is not good. This is not right. David has done nothing wrong. He has only been faithful to you. Why would you want to kill your servant? Hearing this, Saul seems to relent and backs down. But we see time passes on, and David seems to only be getting bigger and bigger, and by comparison, Saul is feeling smaller and smaller. And after another battle and another victory for David, Saul feels the walls closing in. The time coming near. I mean, he becomes obsessed with David, seemingly. He continues in this kind of madness. David, for Saul, has become public enemy number one, and he has got to be eliminated. And so we see him change his tactics. No more games, no more charades. After another failed attempt with the spear, David escapes, going back home, but this time Saul doesn't leave it there. He sends more men after David to watch over his house with orders to kill David in the morning. Michal, who knows her father but loves David, comes to David and says, if you don't save yourself tonight, you will be dead in the morning. The men outside watching the house have come to kill you. So if you want to live, here's the plan. Here's the plan that I've devised for you. I want you to climb down my window to escape where they can't see you. And to buy more time, we're told Michal puts a dummy in her bed, a dummy idol in her bed, so that the next morning when the men come in asking for David, she says, well, David is sick in bed. He can't come out to you right now. But Saul is done with half measures. So even at this point, he says, he orders David to be brought to him, even in his bed. And when the soldiers discover the dummy in the bed, Saul realizes that he has been deceived by his own daughter and that she was a part of it. This sordid story is not over. From this point on, we'll find in the scriptures that David becomes a fugitive on the run for his life. And he will be so until Saul is dead. What do you do when you are stabbed in the back by the very people you trusted. People that you believed were your friends and had your best at heart. People that you've only tried to help. Right? You came with good intentions, but it seems like they're going to hurt you, to slander you, to destroy you. You feel like you're being targeted for nothing you've done, for just being who you are. What do you do? This morning, I want you to hear me when I say this. There will be no preaching on this today, no judgment. I just want to make some observations that I am seeing from this story of David and Saul. Just some observations that I'm making. First, David may have thought he was alone in all of this, in what he was going through, that nobody knew, that nobody saw what was happening to him. But we see that people did know, people did see, and some of those people saw through the deception that harm was being done to David. Abraham Lincoln once said, "You can fool some of the people all the time, and all of the people some of the time, but you cannot all of the people all the time. The truth will win out." And so the encouragement is to keep fighting the good fight. The second is David may have thought he was alone in all of it, but as it turns out, he wasn't. He wasn't alone, even though he thought he was alone in it. No, he had allies. Allies who didn't just speak their support, right? But who used people that were willing to use their privileged status to speak truth to power. Isn't that what Jonathan did when he confronted his father? He used his privileged position to speak truth to power, knowing that his own father was in the wrong. And when push comes to shove, some allies are willing to put their own safety, their own well-being on the line during your most desperate hours to help you. Isn't that what McCall did for him, for David? Putting herself on the line so that David could escape. Here's something else I observed. No matter what Saul did, David did not retaliate in kind. Even though violence was being done to David, David didn't return that violence. He didn't perpetuate that violence any further. No, it stopped with him. He didn't respond. He didn't react to Saul in the same way that Saul was treating him. Which I think leads to my fourth observation, which is David always seemed to act out of his true character. Even though he was being dragged down into this messiness of Saul, David didn't become like Saul, his persecutor. No, David stayed true to himself. Just because somebody else is being petty or doing shameful things to you doesn't mean that you have to compromise who you are, your values. You can and are able to act from your own character, from who you are. At the end of this story, I wondered, how was David able to do this, right? It sounds great, and you'd love to be able to do that, but how was he able to do that? How did he keep his sanity and composure, stay true to his nature and not compromise who he is. How was he able to do that? Well, I think just like maybe the most important things in our lives, it's often the things that we don't see that has the most impact on us and who we are. As I was researching and preparing for this message, I ran into another passage of Scripture, Psalm 59. And so if you open Psalm 59, stay there, please. This is what you will find. It says, Psalm 59, prayer for deliverance from enemies, to the leader, do not destroy, of David, Miktam, when Saul ordered his house to be watched in order to kill him. You see that? This is the psalm that David wrote as his house was being watched by Saul's men, knowing that they will come to kill him. So this is what David was doing behind the scenes. When he was out of the public's eye, this is what he was doing to keep his sanity in check, to stay composed through it all. This is how he was able to maintain his character and not compromise his values, because what day after day he was bringing himself before God and crying out to him. Let's just read a few of those verses in Psalm 59. Deliver me from my enemies, O my God. Protect me from those who rise up against me. Deliver me from those who work evil. From the bloodthirsty, save me. Even now they lie in wait for my life. The mighty stir up strife against me. For no transgression or sin of mine, O Lord. For no fault of mine, they run and make ready. So rouse yourself, O my Lord, and come to help and see. This was David's practice when he was being attacked, when he was executed. How do you keep your sanity and not lose your composure? What do you do when others are losing their minds and blaming you? Where do you go for your strength? What is the source of that strength for you, that peace in your life? For David, it was this. He availed himself to the Lord. This was his practice, a practice of his faith. It is not something that you just believe and say, I confess. It is a faith that you daily practice in your life by coming into God's presence daily, by being still so that you can recognize God who is in your presence, to open up your mind, your heart, your soul until you know that God is there, until you can know that God is with you in all that you do, until God is able to fill you up with His Spirit, His presence, so that His strength, His joy, His power, His peace can be yours in all that you do. When you get up from your knees and to go about your day, you can know that God is with you in all that you are and in all that you do. So what are you doing when nobody's watching? What are you doing when no one is watching? How are you renewing your strength? How is God being present in your life? I will say one more thing as we close, which is when the story progresses on, we see David when he feels overwhelmed, right? When he feels like there's too much on his hands, we do see David reach out to Samuel, his spiritual mentor, to help. And then at another time, he reaches out to his best friend, Jonathan, who loves him as himself. And so this is a word to us, I think, to say when it gets to be too much, right? You don't have to feel like to suffer in silence, that it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to cry out and know that God is there and that God has provided people in your life to be able to help stand with you and stand for you as well. And so when everyone is losing their minds all about you, I want you to know that God is there. And so will your faith a practice of coming to him daily and to ask God to fill you up in his strength so that no matter where you go, whatever you do, whoever you face, you will go with God in his spirit and his power. In the name of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, amen.